Hey there everybody, Coach Brandon here with Coach Ant, and today we're going to be going over more driving and dragging takedown options. And this week we're going to be looking at leg dominant options. Last week we looked at dragging options that used mainly the arms, things like collar drags, snap downs, shoulder snap downs, and spinning shoulder snap downs, the arm spins. And then we looked at arm dominant takedowns that drove our opponent backward, ankle picks, knee picks, single legs, and double legs. And now this week we're looking at dragging options and driving options where we're going to use our legs to interfere with our opponent's base of support rather than our arms. Okay? We're going to start with the dragging options. There are 6 dragging options and 4 driving options that we're going to go through. Now among those various options, understand I'm not going to have time to get to all the different variations of each technique in this video. Okay, it would be impractical, we'd be here all day. But understand that there are many different ways you can set a power hand. We have a straight lapel grip, and can you face me? We have a straight lapel grip, we have cross lapel grips. If he's punched forward in a stance, we have rear shoulder grips. Okay, we can come in with underhooks and overhooks. So there's a lot of different ways you can set power hands that can manipulate your opponent's head and shoulders. But as long as you manipulate the head and shoulders correctly, you can get your opponent out of balance and take them down. So I'm not going to go over all the different options with all the different sweeps, all the different takedowns, but understand that with most of these takedowns, your power hand and your control hand could be set in a couple different places. The control hand, let's look at the control hand. So I have a power hand that sets in the lapel. That's okay, we'll just switch sides. A power hand in the lapel. My control hand will often be at the cuff. It can be here at the elbow. It can be here at the shoulder. And then in some cases, sometimes we'll double up on the lapels as well, either going here or here. So you may think, oh, how am I going to remember all that? But you just look at the human body and you can see and understand where you want to control. You always want to control at the end of the lever. So on the arm, we control the end of the lever here. We typically control down here at the cuff. In a no-gi situation, we control the wrist. Now we control the end of this lever. We can control the elbow, either using the seam. So we can start to move, get our opponent out of balance using that. In no-gi, we can cup the elbow. In the gi, we can control up here at the shoulder, the base of the lever. Okay, now I control the head and the shoulders. Or I can come here and control the head directly. So it's not that you have to remember a bunch of random grips. They're not random really. They're set specifically to maximize leverage and control of our opponent. They're always at the ends of the levers or the bases of the levers. Okay? So now that you understand that there are different grips you can use, let's start getting into some of our practical applications for our takedowns, starting with a forward foot sweep. Now a sweep is where we take an unweighted leg and we sweep the foot away while it's unweighted, so he no longer has a base of support, and then we pull them into the hole. If you want the judo term for this technique, if you want to go and research this and learn more about it, the judo term is de-ashi harai. In English, I'm just going to call it a forward foot sweep. Okay, de-ashi harai, forward foot sweep. Let's take a look. Now, in truth, bear with me because I am not great at this. Okay, I'm not great at timing with the foot sweeps, but I will do my best. Okay. First things first, we approach in a stance at gripping distance. Once we're in gripping distance, we come down to a semi-crouch. This is also all the same. If he ever goes to reach my lapel, I don't let him set a power hand on. I always intercept. Never let your opponent set a power hand on. Your opponent's power hand will screw up almost all of your takedown attempts. Okay, well, maybe we'll come back to more of that. Let's do that right now. Because this is so important that most of your takedown attempts are going to be founded on what your opponent's doing with the power arm. They're going to be affected by what he's doing with the power arm. If he has this grip, and I try to go in for a foot sweep, or I try to do anything, he just straightens this arm, he just straightens it. It's really hard to get into any sort of takedown. Now, nobody sits there with the arm completely locked up the whole time. And what'll happen is he'll relax, he'll let the elbow bend, we'll be working, but anytime I go to try anything, he straightens it, and it can't do anything. Not only that, but his power hand also allows him to push and pull me around the mat and get me out of balance. So your first priority is always to deny their power hand. Either intercept it, when we're here, he goes to grab it, we intercept, and we control, so now if he goes to reset it again, he can't. Or if I'm a day late and $1 short and he gets the lapel, then we need to immediately look to address the grip by stripping it off. Never let that lapel, never let that grip sit on your lapel. Never let him have a power hand. So again, he goes to my lapel, intercept. Okay? From here, I'm going to set my power hand down here. Now, in a Gyashi Harai, in a foot sweep, when I pull him forward, that leg is going to become unweighted for a split second. Okay? When I pull him forward, he takes a step. There's a moment where there's no weight on the foot. Okay? So what we're going to do is when we pull, we're going to look at time and intercept and sweep that foot out of the way. Now there are some drills you can do with this. If we lock up, I'm going to give him a power hand. Close stance in. No, closed. Yes, exactly. So when I step back, when I walk forward, he's going to go back with the same leg. We're going to mirror. Yep, just mirror, step back, yep. And the same thing. And we get into a habit, yep. Where we just walk in a rhythm, okay? So what you see is that as we get in the habit of walking, I can take his foot out. As we get into that rhythm, I time the step. So this is more of a drill. This is a drill you can do to learn the technique better. So here we line up with our stance. I walk just like that. We go this way. We go this way. Now as I go back, we're going to go the other way. I go back. And before his foot touches the floor, I brush it out of the way. And then I pull him into the hole. So what this would look like in more of a competitive setting, we're here. Again, I always like to take that hand off. I'm pushing him around. As I go to give him a pull, and I brush that foot out of the way as he goes to land. It's almost like he slips on a banana peel. He goes to step. As he goes to step, he finds that his foot's taken out of the way, and he falls, expecting his basic support to be there, but it's no longer there. So that's a forward foot sweep. A foot sweep, a sweep is when I take an unweighted foot and I brush it away, as I just did. Next, we're going to look at a straight forward trip, where I'm still using my straight leg, my right to his left, but this time, rather than needing great timing of getting that leg to step up and brushing it out of the way, this time, I'm going to block it as I pull, and he's going to trip and either go all the way down, or oftentimes he'll stumble. Before we get into this next technique, before we get into the straightforward trip, there's a very important key lesson for you to know regarding these foot sweeps, these reaps and things. These techniques are not going to work every time. Oftentimes you're going to get your opponent to stumble, trip, and take a couple steps around the mat, stumbling, but a lot of times they won't go all the way down to the floor. That's okay. These trips and sweeps, think of them like a jab in boxing. In the sport of boxing, boxers will use their jab very quickly, throw it out there and bring it back, and they're trying to set up their more dominant shots, their more dominant techniques, their more powerful techniques. They're not expecting the jab to knock their opponent out. The same way that I'm not necessarily expecting my foot sweeps and my trips to take my opponent down to the floor. Oftentimes I'm just using my trips and my sweeps to stumble them, getting them out of balance. And now that they're out of balance, we can go into some other techniques. Snap downs, ankle picks, knee picks, single legs, double legs, collar drags, and all the other techniques we saw before. And then other big reaping, throws and reaps. We're going to look at things like that later too, which are a little bit more authoritative. Reaps are generally going to get a longer effect than foot sweeps. Come back to that more later. But these trips and these sweeps where we just take our feet and we start to block and pull or sweep them out of the way, you may not get takedowns with these a lot, but don't let that discourage you. These are still tremendous ways to off-balance your opponent and set up other takedowns, which you then can connect to these foot sweeps and trips, okay? So don't get discouraged when you don't get them. Use them to stumble it off balance. When you get it, great, awesome, congratulations. But oftentimes, more often than not, your opponent is going to stumble, and that's going to set up other attacks. Let's get into our trip. So once again, hand goes to my lapel, I intercept, and I deny the power hand. I'm going to set my power hand on hand. Now I'm going to use my two grips to start generating motion, pulling them around the mat, getting into the pyramid position. Okay? Let's rotate. Once I'm in the pyramid position, what I'm going to do is I'm going to step in with my back leg, either to the inside ankle line, stepping on his ankle line to the inside, or stepping on the ankle line to the outside of his foot. So inside his foot or outside his foot, they're both okay. We step to the ankle line. My right foot is going to reach across, and I'm going to block this foot just like we did with our collar drag. Here. Now as I do this, I'm going to pull myself in, so I make myself nice and tight to mat. This doesn't work super well when we're at great length. Okay, it's less likely to find success. So I'm going to pull myself in, pulling around the corner, and we get a trip down to the floor. Now sometimes I'll go all the way down to the floor like that, other times I'll just stumble. So this time I pull them into the pyramid position. I've done all my setup, I've created the pyramid position. And now we're ready to go. This time, hand might stumble through. Right? Sometimes you're going to get them all the way up. Sometimes you're going to go all the way down. Sometimes they go all the way down. Other times, they stumble, and then you can start going into your other takedowns. Okay? So one more time, he goes to reach, I intercept. If he gets the grip, we come back, and we break it off. From here, I pull him around, I get to the pyramid position. Once I'm in the pyramid position, it's go time. I step to the outside ankle line, or inside. I reach across, get myself nice and tight, and as I pull, I block. When I pull, Anthony needs to take a step with that left leg. I'm putting my foot in the way, so when he goes to take his step, he finds that he can't take the step. Then we knock him down to the floor. So there's our straightforward trip. If you want the judo term for this technique, it is Sasai Surakomi Ashi. If you want to go and look at judo instructionals and videos, Sasai Surakomi Ashi, or people call it Sasai for short. So one more time, we're here, we intercept. I square him up to me. We go through, trip down to the floor. I'm using the sole of my foot. Don't kick your partner. When you guys are working these, don't go in and start kicking. You're going to upset a lot of your training partners if you just start coming and kicking at the shins. Okay, it's going to hurt. It's going to hurt them. It's not going to feel good. You'll lose a lot of training partners that way. We come in, blocking with the sole of our foot. I contour my foot like a hand, like I'm gripping with my foot, curling my toes and my heel toward each other. And then we block and grab the shin as we take them down. Another element that I can do to make this technique a little stronger, I haven't talked about this yet. If he grabs me, sometimes I can do this with a power hand. If I come and I grab the elbow, and I push his elbow over his own head. If we're in here, and I start coming, if I can start to come in and push his elbow up over his own head as I go through the trip, it's usually harder for him to maintain his balance. when his shoulders are rotated like that. Take that elbow up and over. Take him over. We can also do this to the other side. I can go in the other direction, pushing his head over his own elbow. If we're here, grab my elbow. I can push his elbow in, push his head over his own elbow, and we can do the same thing to the opposite side, where I step and block. I'm here, step, block, down to the floor. Okay. I can do it with a cuff. Let's say I'm trying to do it with the elbow. I'm here, but he stiff arms, and I can't get in. Remember, that power hand, that'll muck up a lot of your takedown attempts. So we come in, we get that thing off. Now we come in. Now I step in, pulling the head over, trying to get him to either fall or stumble. Other times they'll stumble. One more time. I go in here, he stumbles, and then we snap him down to the floor, and we go behind. So that's the side surikomiyashi, the straightforward trick. Now, I'm going to look at another technique. This one I highly favor. I use this one a lot. It's a lot more effective. The cross forward trip. In Japanese, we call this one the tai otoshi. Okay, where we step across with our leg, and we use our cross leg to trip them, and we drag them forward over that leg. Okay, so we looked at the straightforward trip. Now we're going to look at a situation where I come in, and rather than using my right leg to block his left, I use my right leg to block his right. Okay? So rather than tripping this way, I trip this way. Okay, so here's how it's going to look. We come in, he goes to grab my lapel. I deny the power hand. I set my grips. Now from here I want to get to the pyramid position. Another way that I can get to either the pyramid position or expose a better angle for this cross forward trip is I can come in and attempt an inside back trip and get him to step back. Step back. So just by putting a block behind his foot, leave your foot where it is. By putting a block behind his foot and then pushing, he has to pick his foot up, step back, exactly. And that gives me a very good angle for the cross forward trip. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to step my left leg back toward the outside ankle line. My right leg steps across, step to the outside ankle line across like so. And now from here I take my two grips on the upper body and I'm going to pull them forward and down toward the floor, just like so. Again, I deny the power hand. I set my own power hand. Now from here I want to get to the pyramid position. I can step to it. I can pull him to get to it. So I can move myself, I can move him, or I can attempt these trips where I step in, block him, he goes back, and now he gives me a better angle to step across. Understand if we go through, switch your stance back. Yes. Here, the space between us is kind of closed. It feels a little clunky. It's hard for me to get my left leg all the way to the ankle line. Stand up. Look at where his ankle line is, where I have to get my left foot. It's all the way back there. That's a lot of motion to make. That is so hard. I'm never going to get all the way back there. So when I use my cross forward trip, I like to try to get this leg back. Step this leg back. Further. Now his ankle line is right there. Right here. Step back. Now it's further around the corner. It's further away from me. So that's what I like to do. I'm here. Block, get him to step. Now I'm in a good position. I step in with my back step, my left leg to the outside ankle line. I reach across outside ankle line. I pull his head and arm forward. And we trip him down to the floor in front. I'm going to show you guys another variation of this, a drop variation. In a drop cross forward trip or a drop Tayotoshi, I'm going to drop to the knee of my support leg. Now why would I do that? It's going to take away from my mobility, but it also allows me to impart my fallen body weight into ant. Okay, so when I come in, he sets a power hand, I strip that thing off. I set my own power hand. I come in, I get him to step back. When I come in my drop Tayotoshi, I'm going to step back, but I'm going to drop right to my knee. And as I drop to my knee, that's going to start to get a pulling effect on his posture. I step across, and now from Ant's poor posture position, I drag his head and arm down toward the floor, and we trip him through. So that's a drop trip, a drop cross forward trip, or a drop Tayotoshi. Okay, one more time. He goes to grip, we intercept. I'm here, block, come in, just like so. This one, I really favor this one. I have a lot of success with it. I'll do this one more time at a regular speed, and then we'll move on to a few other dragging options. We're here, you get a sense of grip, I break, I pull him around the floor, and we put him down to the mat. Okay, so we've seen 3 options so far. We've seen the forward foot sweep, where we get our opponent to take a step, waiting to time it so that foot is completely unweighted, and we brush their foot out of the way before it lands and pull them into the hole. Then we had a straightforward trip, where this time we put a blocker in before we make them take a step. We step to the outside ankle line, we block their foot, and we pull them forward, blocking their step, blocking their ability to recover. Now sometimes they'll go all the way down to the floor, other times they'll stumble and be thrown out of balance. Once they're thrown out of balance by our forward trip attempt, we now identify, is their weight on their heels or is it on their toes? If it's on their toes and their head's low, we drag them down with dragging techniques, collar drag, snap downs. If we hit the trip and their weight goes back onto their heels, we can shoot it for single legs, double legs, ankle picks, etc. Remember, use these trips and these sweeps as the jab. Use these to set up your other takedowns. Mix these in to off-balance your opponent. Don't think you're going to get the trip every single time you try it. Try the trip. If it works, awesome. If it doesn't, don't just be upset that it didn't work. Think about, what am I going to chain that to next? How am I going to follow this attack up? And then follow it up quickly. If you wait too long to follow it up, your opponent will recover. And now you have to once again attack somebody who's in a good, solid, defensive, sound structure. No. Use these trips, get them out of balance, get them stumbling, and while they are out of position, launch your next attack, launch your ankle pick, launch your double leg, etc. So those, and then we went to the cross forward trip. Okay, well this time I turn my back to my opponent, step into the outside ankle line, I step across, and now that I've got that blocker in front, I pull them forward over my shoulder, drag them down to the floor, and we have a cross forward trip. So foot sweep, straight forward trip, and cross forward trip. Now, those are all smaller techniques where I'm using my ankle and my foot. Now let's get into some bigger dragging techniques where I'm going to use my hips and my reaping leg to get my opponent out of balance. These are going to be more powerful. You can still use these as a jab, you can still use these as a setup, but these will also more often find you success with the throw as well, provided you do them properly. They're more powerful if you use the more legs and hips rather than the feet. Okay, let's take a look. So first, let's talk about the hip throw. Now, the hip throw classically has always been taught. I come in, I get an underhook and a belt grip. I gather up this arm, I step across, I bring my hips through, I bring his hips up and over, and then I toss him down to the floor. That's always the way hip throws have been taught. But in truth, that's not easy to do. Okay, that'll work if you're trying to throw your grandmother, but it won't work in a highly competitive setting. Okay? So when I come in and I get this grip, the problem is when I go to step my hips across, Ant is going to do something called hip check. When I go to step my hips across, he's going to bring his left hip forward. Head back, shoulders back, hips forward. And now it's going to be really tough for me to throw him. His center of gravity is all wrong. Okay? It's also tough for me to get my hips all the way across. When I try to step my hip across, his hips come forward, his hips blocking my hips out. And I can't get my hips across his hips. We're going to look at this in the future when we look at countering our opponent's takedowns. We're going to learn how to hip check. We're going to learn what Ant's doing right now. But for now, let's look at it from our point of view. I go into the hip throw and it's not working here, okay? So, how do we modify the hip throw so that it works in a more competitive setting? Well, we're going to make this a little bit faster, and we're not going to throw our hips across as far. We're not going to be required to get our hips all the way across, because then this hip check will stop it pretty easy. And we're not going to take all the time to try to push our hips across, because it just takes too long. So what are we going to do? So I'm here. I want to get my right arm as an underhook on Ant's arm and to his belt. I want to control the hips. Now that can be hard to do. If I'm just reaching in, he's going to be swatting my arm away. He's not just going to let me walk in and get an underhook, right? So one thing I can do from my stance, I can reach into my rear grip, grab, and I can give a quick pull. That almost always gets the elbows out away from the body. That quick pull, that quick stumbling, where your opponent has to catch their balance, is a great opportunity to go in with that underhook. So we're here, we're hand fighting, I get this grip, I pull him in, and I pull him into my underhook, I grab the belt. Now from here, keep a good head position. I reach and I grab the far sleeve, let's move. I'm gonna reach and grab the far sleeve. Now once I have the far sleeve, I'm gonna step my left foot to the apex of the pyramid, and my right leg steps just inside his legs like so. I just throw my hips back against this hip over here. Against this hip. Okay? So I come in, my left foot goes to the apex of the pyramid, my right leg steps through, I turn my hips, and my right hip gets his hip out of bounds. And now I'm just going to continue to turn through and put him down to the floor. So there's a sense, and when I'm hitting this technique, I'm jumping into almost like a sprinter stance. Okay? I step in, my right hip throws back into his hips, and I pull everything forward and around my hips. It's usually not a big theatrical throw, but it will oftentimes either stumble your opponent enough to get the takedown, or stumble them enough to follow up with another technique. So again, we're here hand fighting, I'm trying to set my grips, he's not letting me. Maybe I come in, I get a rear grip, a grip with my left hand. I reach in not with my power hand, but with my control hand. I pull, and I get my underhook right here. From here, we go to grip fight here, I grab the far hand, and then we jump into our sprinter stance. Throwing him around the corner, sending him down to the floor. So that's the hip throw. Now, we're going to take this a step further, where I'm going to bring my hip in, just like I did, but now we're going to start reaping the leg away. Now when I step in, I'm going to use my right leg to reap his leg up and away to get him out of balance, and him on one foot, and throwing him with a straightforward reap. If you want the judo term for this, it's called the uchimata. Okay? So we're in our stance. He sets a power hand grip on me. I say, no way, Jose, taking it off, never letting him control my head. Now I come up here, I set my own power hand. Once again, there's a number of ways we can set it. I'm just going to work with the standard straight lapel. Okay? Now from here, I start working my opponent around the mat, moving out of position. Once I have the pyramid position, and I see his weights on his toes, that's a good time for me to go. I'm going to step to the inside ankle line with my right leg. My left leg steps back, just like so. Now my right leg is going to straighten, and I'm going to pick that leg up off the floor as I throw him forward. My apologies, this is a hard technique to do slowly. Okay? So I come in, like so. I reap, picking that leg up as I throw him forward, throwing him around the corner. This one gets to be tricky because we are balancing on one leg. As we fall forward, bringing our head down to the floor, lifting this leg up higher, forward reap. One more time. We intercept. I take my power hand grip. I pull him around. And now I step into the proper position. I go 1, 2 as I turn my body. 1, 2. And then 3 is my head going down and forward as my right leg kicks back, reaping that leg out of the way. We're here. Or Uchimata. Or the straightforward reap. You can also do this with the underarm belt grip, like we did with the hip throw. I could be here. I can come in. I can take my underarm belt grip. When we go to hand fight here, I get a grip. And then I can come in. And I can throw with the belt grip as well. One more time on that. I'm blocking. I don't let him get a power hand. I come in, I pull, setting my grip here. I go to catch the far arm. Now the same leg work, the footwork. I step, step. Now as I lean forward, I pull the belt, pulling him out of position with my grips. As my right leg kicks back, and we send him down. Now, I'm going to look at one more technique. The cross forward reap. There's a couple different ways to do this. We got to be careful with this one. There are some safety issues with it, so let's be mindful. Once again, he reaches, I intercept. Now with this one, I pull through. I would actually rather have an underarm belt grip for this one. So I'm actually going to switch. I'm going to change strategy right now. Pull through, and I get my belt grip, just like so. Now from here, I have control of the hips through the belt grip. This is a tremendous advantage. I can start pulling his hips and moving his hips around the floor where I control the belt. As he's going to get some control of me, I'm going to look to gain control of him. I'm going to come here grabbing either the elbow. I could grab the cuff as well. I could take this grip as well, right? If I get an overhook. They're all good. Now from here, I'm going to step across. I could do that same footwork. Or I go 1, 2. Now, from here I'm going to step across. And what I like to do now, almost like a hip throw, I load Ant's weight up onto my hips. So I'm going to pull Ant's weight into me, get him light on his toes, and get all of Ant's weight up onto his right toes now. Now with his weight onto his right toes, I'm going to lean forward, kicking my right leg up toward the ceiling. And we take that leg up off the floor.